I always figured I'd spend most of my life alone out here in the Swan Valley. Not in a sad way, just in the practical Montana sense. Folks are spread thin across the valley. Houses tucked back in the trees or set miles down dirt roads that don't get plowed right after storms. Most people my age grow up, finish high school, and head for Missoula, Kalispell, or the larger cities on the coast. What's left are the old families, the old ranchers, and a few stubborn younger ones like me who try to make a life on land their grandparents worked before them. My name's Evan, 28 years old, and the closest thing I've had to regular company over the past 3 years has been cattle and fence posts. I inherited about 30 acres and a fixer-upper of a farmhouse from my granddad, along with enough debt and rusted equipment to make sure I never get bored. Living out here's quiet, honest, and often lonely, but I chose it, and most days, I'm proud of that. The valley's beautiful in a rough-edged kind of way, thick timber running up both sides, the Mission Range to the west, the Swan Range to the east, and the river running cold and clear right down the middle like it's cutting the whole world open. Sunrise makes the mist glow in the pastures. Sunset catches the ridgelines like fire. I've got 5 cows calving this spring, a dozen more in the main herd, and a hayfield I treat better than my own bedroom. If you'd asked me 6 months ago what the strangest thing happening in my life was, I'd probably have said the price of diesel. That was before the rumors started, before the freezer got ripped apart, before the thing on my porch. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, all anyone knew was that something was rummaging around the valley at night. At first, it was small stuff, nothing anyone paid much mind to. A couple of chickens taken from the Petersons' coop, trash cans knocked over in the middle of the night, and something rummaging around the tool sheds without stealing anything worth mentioning. Everyone pointed to bears. Made sense. We get black bears wandering through all the time, and the odd grizzly cutting down from the high country when late spring pushes them lower. Then it got stranger. Freezers, big chest freezers farmers keep in basements, mudrooms, and half-finished root cellars, started getting raided. Not knocked over or dented, destroyed, torn open in ways that didn't quite match the brute force chaos you'd expect from a hungry bear. Lids ripped clean off their hinges, yes, but sometimes the hinges themselves had been loosened first. Deep claw marks across the insulation, but clustered around weak points, like whatever did. It had tested the structure before committing. Meat missing, every time. Out here, folks don't usually lock down their freezers like fortresses. Basements stay cool year-round, so most families just stick their chest freezers down there and call it good. The doors are old, but not particularly heavy, built decades ago to keep in warmth or keep out the cold, not to stop something that knows how to pry and probe. Bears will smash, shove, and batter until something gives, but these scenes looked different, cleaner, as if something had worked at the seal first, or wedged claws under the lip instead of just ramming it. One farmer even swore his freezer had been dragged a few feet before being opened, not rolled, but pulled, straight back, in a line. Those odd details didn't sit right with me. They didn't sit right with a few of the older ranchers either, though nobody said it outright. People preferred the bear theory, a known danger, a familiar story, because the alternative, the idea of something smart enough to test a latch, to find the weak part of a frame, to use brains instead of just strength, well, nobody wanted to think about that. Me? I didn't know what to think. Truth be told, I hadn't been all that concerned when it was happening to other folks, not because I didn't care, but because out here you learn to triage your worries. And I had bigger problems to deal with. Calving season, broken fencing, bills stacking up faster than I could pay them. Strange freezer raids weren't high on my list. Not until the morning I walked downstairs and found my own basement door forced open in a way that didn't look like brute strength at all. The wood was splintered, sure, but not in the wild, chaotic pattern you get when something just barrels through. Instead, the frame had been pried at the hinges first, like whatever got in had tested the door, found the weak spot, and worked it until the screws tore loose. It looked less like a bear smashing its way inside, and more like something determined, and smart, had used just enough force in just the right places to get to what was on the other side. The freezer was still standing, the lock still in place, the lid pried open and bent upwards on one side, and for a split second, my first thought was that someone, a person, not an animal, had broken in and stolen the meat. The basement door had looked too deliberate, too carefully forced for anything on four legs, but then I saw the claw marks gouged into the metal and insulation, raked so deep I couldn't fit my fingers in them. They weren't random swipes either. They were clustered around the side, as far away from the lock as possible, as if whatever did this had gone straight for the weak spot and worked at it until the freezer finally gave. The whole scene felt methodical, almost purposeful, like whoever or whatever had been down there wasn't just hungry, but knew exactly where to apply pressure and exactly how to get what it came for. I remember standing there in the cold basement, dust hanging in the air, staring at the ruin of it all and thinking, bears don't do this, not like this. But you can't exactly say stuff like that out loud around here without people giving you a look like you've been drinking before breakfast. So I bought a new freezer, bigger, heavier, with a sturdier seal, and replaced the basement door entirely with a metal one I ordered from a hardware supplier in Kalispell. I even added a larger lock, the kind meant for outbuildings and tool sheds, figuring it'd be enough to keep out whatever had gotten in before. Then I chalked it up to a freak incident, a smart bear, a desperate one. Truth is, I pushed it out of my mind because I had other things to focus on, like the fact that the new vet, Maya Ellison, 27, smart, funny, and way out of my league, kept stopping by to check on my cattle. She first came out for what I swore was nothing. One cow acting a little sluggish, not even limping. I could have handled it myself, but she insisted on coming, said she needed the field experience, and I sure wasn't about to argue with a woman who was nice to look at, pleasant to talk to, and smart in a way that made you pay attention. A rare breed out here, and one I wasn't stupid enough to turn away. She had this way of talking that made you feel like you weren't wasting her time. Even when she was elbow deep in a cow's butthole, she'd just chat, laugh, push stray hair out of her face with her wrist so she didn't smear muck everywhere. I tried not to stare too much, tried not to be too obvious, didn't always succeed. She never called me out on it, though. Just kept showing up, vaccinations, routine checks, helping with one tough birth. Each time I found myself looking forward to her truck rolling up the long driveway, and each time I felt like an idiot for getting so worked up. You go long enough without dating, without someone paying attention to you, you start to forget how to act normal. But Maya never made me feel stupid. She just made me nervous in a good way. And somewhere between cow vaccinations and fixing her truck's flat tire one afternoon, I mentioned the cooler incident to her in that offhand way people do when they're trying not to sound shaken. To my surprise, she didn't laugh it off. Instead, she shared her own unsettling story. Just a week earlier, something or someone had broken into the storage shed behind the vet clinic. The place was a mess. Dozens of cans of dog and cat food had been pried open and licked clean, and bags of kibble were ripped apart with the contents half-eaten. It was the kind of destruction she'd expect from a bear, but the manner of the break-in didn't sit right with her. It looked more like a person had forced the door. Whatever it was, hadn't stopped there. It had tried getting to the dog locked in the outdoor kennel that night. The heavy metal door showed long scratch marks, and the steel bars had been bent inward, as if something had leaned its full weight against them. The dog had been found cowering in the far corner, too terrified to move an inch. Even the back door of the clinic, reinforced, meant to keep junkies out, showed signs of an attempted break-in. Hearing her tell it sent a chill through me. We both agreed that something weird was happening in the area, but before either of us could dwell on it, she smiled, brushed it off, and the conversation shifted. Somewhere in that moment, fueled by nerves and maybe a little adrenaline, I managed to ask her to come over for dinner sometime. Stammered my way through it, really. She said yes with a smile that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't imagining things. The plan was simple. Steaks on the porch at my place. Quiet evening, good food. Maybe a chance to stop tripping over my own words around her. That was before everything went sideways, before the smell, before the growling, before I realized the thing raiding freezers all over the valley wasn't a bear, or anything else that fits in the world the way it's supposed to. If you've never lived in the Swan Valley, you might think this place is too peaceful, too quiet, too beautiful for something like that. But we've got deep woods here. Pockets of land where even hunters don't go because the ground sinks under your boots or the trees grow too thick. Things can hide here. Things can survive and stay out of sight for a long time. And something had been doing exactly that long before it decided to try its luck with me. The days leading up to the date were full of rumors. People hearing weird sounds at night, low howls that didn't quite match coyotes, something big running across the road near Condon at 2 in the morning, a shadow moving at the edge of a yard feeder light, always fleeting, always just enough to make people wonder and spread ever more ridiculous rumors. By the time the evening of our date rolled around, my nerves were in full revolt. I must have checked the grill half a dozen times before Maya even pulled into the yard. The steaks were resting on a plate near the kitchen sink, seasoned and ready to go. I kept pacing around the house, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, adjusting the porch lights, sweeping imaginary dust off the steps, anything to keep my hands busy. Maya showed up right on time, her tundra rumbling to a stop in that easy, confident way she had about everything. She stepped out wearing jeans and a light flannel, her hair pulled back, cheeks a little pink from the evening chill. She smiled when she saw me, soft, warm, like she was genuinely happy to be there. That alone nearly killed me. "Smells amazing already," she said, nodding toward the raw steaks as she walked into the kitchen. "Hope so," I managed. "Been practicing." She laughed, and the sound eased something tight in my chest. For a little while, it really did feel like the start of a genuinely pleasant night. We got the steaks on the grill, cracked a couple beers, nothing fancy, just whatever I had on hand, and leaned against the porch railing while the sun sank behind the ridgeline. The air smelled like pine sap and wood smoke from one of my neighbor's chimneys down the valley. Maya teased me about over-prepping for a simple dinner, and I teased her about pretending she wasn't just as nervous. We moved back and forth between the porch and the kitchen, chatting about work, gossip from town, and whether or not old Bill Kersey actually saw a wolf walking on 2 legs by the creek behind his house. Most folks figured he'd been drinking or napping too hard, but Maya and I shared a look that said neither of us was ready to laugh that kind of story off anymore. I'd just taken the steaks off the grill and put them on plates on the table. Then, when I went inside to grab more beers, a faint smell drifted through the house, sour, damp, musky, like wet fur left too long in the sun. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up long before I knew why. Maya also came inside and wrinkled her nose. "You smell that?" she asked. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Not the grill. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't food. It wasn't anything that belonged inside a house." I set the beers down and stepped toward the doorway. Maya followed a half step behind me, close enough that I could feel her breath catch. The smell suddenly thickened as we got closer. Heavy, animal, with a sour undertone that made my stomach twist. It was coming from outside. Must have drifted in from the open window in the bedroom. That's why I first smelled it in the kitchen. "Maybe a raccoon got into something," Maya whispered, though her voice didn't sound convinced. I eased the screen door open a few inches and leaned to the side just enough to get a look at the porch, and there it was. At first, my mind rejected what I was seeing. My brain went blank, like it couldn't slot the shape into anything familiar. A form hunched over the small wooden table, shoulders narrow but long, spine bowed like a starving wolf trying to make itself even smaller. But it wasn't a wolf. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen. It was roughly the size of a man, tall even while crouched, but gaunt, underfed, with long limbs that seemed to hang too loosely. The fur was patchy and dull, stretched thin over ribs. Its head was shaped wrong for a normal animal, elongated, too round on top, too compact for a canine, ears pinned back, muzzle drawn and tight. In its clawed, too human hands, it clutched our steaks, still warm, still dripping juice. Its fingers weren't shaped for grasping the way ours are, but they worked disturbingly well all the same. Long, narrow digits curled inward, each tipped with a dark, hooked claw that dug into the meat like pins. I watched, stomach twisting, as it used those hands with a strange, jerky coordination, lifting the steaks up toward its muzzle, tilting its head in an almost human motion to line the food up just right. It didn't bite at them the way a dog would. It fed by bracing the meat with one hand and tearing pieces away with quick, precise snaps of its jaws, as if it had learned how to adapt human-like movements to an anatomy that wasn't built for them. For a heartbeat, the creature didn't notice us. It was too focused, too desperate, tearing into the meat like it had been starving for weeks. Wet, smacking sounds filled the porch, and my gut twisted as a line of saliva stretched from its teeth to the table. Then the floorboards creaked under my feet. The creature's head snapped toward me so fast I heard the joints crack. A sound rumbled out of its chest, low, hoarse, almost wet, a growl, a warning, the kind a dog gives when you get too close to its bowl. Maya sucked in a sharp breath. I felt her hand brush mine, not grabbing, just touching, like she needed to know I was still there. The thing rose slightly, not quite standing straight, but lifting itself enough to make its size unmistakable. Its shoulders jutted up like bony peaks, and its eyes locked on me with a sharp, animal calculation. Not curiosity, not confusion, fight or flight, territory. Another growl rolled out of its throat, deeper this time, louder, more assertive, the kind you feel more than hear. I swallowed hard and did the first thing that came to my mind. I stepped forward, inching toward the door handle so I could close it. The last thing I wanted was for that thing to come inside, but it was already too late. The creature had already made that decision. Before my fingers got anywhere near the door handle, it surged forward, not in a full lunge, but in a stiff, deliberate advance. One long arm reached out, claws hooking the edge of the partially open door as if it understood exactly how the barrier worked. With a jerky, unnatural motion, it shoved the door inward and stepped across the threshold, into my house, into the living room. Maya bolted first, instinct taking over before thought. She spun and sprinted down the hallway toward the bedrooms, and I followed, because there was no universe where I was staying out there with that thing. We didn't slam the bedroom door so much as throw our whole weight into it. I twisted the lock with shaking fingers, heart hammering so loud it drowned out my own breathing. Maya pressed herself against the far wall, eyes wide, chest rising and falling in jerky, shallow breaths. For a second, there was silence. Then the sounds started. Heavy steps across the living room. Slow, measured, not hunting, investigating. Something was dragging lightly against the floor. A soft huff of breath, and then the metallic clatter of the refrigerator door being tugged. It had found the fridge. Glass rattled, plastic popped, something thudded to the floor. The creature wasn't raging or thrashing. It was rummaging, methodically, purposefully. It knew exactly where the food was kept. Maya and I backed away from the door, both of us shaking. She whispered, "Evan, what do we do?" Her voice was thin, barely a thread of sound, but the fear in it was sharp enough to cut. I swallowed, thinking fast. Then something clicked in the back of my mind, something I should have thought of the moment we barricaded ourselves inside. The small safe in my wardrobe, the one I kept the .357 Magnum in. I moved as quickly as I could, crossing the bedroom in 3 shaky steps. I knelt, spun the combination lock with trembling fingers, and pulled the safe open. The revolver sat inside, loaded and ready, a heavy, reassuring chunk of steel that carried real stopping power. A .357 Magnum isn't a toy. It's the kind of round people in the valley trust to drop a charging black bear or punch clean through a fence post. It could certainly kill whatever was out there if it came down to it, or at least make it think twice. Holding it made my hands steadier, my breathing slower. For the first time since that thing stepped onto my porch, I felt like I was in control. Maya watched me with wide eyes. Oh, thank God. But there wasn't much time. The rummaging in the kitchen had stopped. Then I heard the floorboards creak again. The creature was making its way down the hallway. Its steps were slow, cautious, and methodical. I could hear the scrape of claws against the walls, the wet huff of its breath as it sniffed for us. Maya pressed herself into the corner, covering her mouth with her hand to quiet her breathing. I raised the gun, aiming at the door. The sniffing stopped for a bit. Then the doorknob rattled, a low scrape as claws probed the metal, a thump as something heavy leaned against the paneling. The trim flexed, the hinges moaned. It was about to test the door, about to force it, the same way it had probably done 100 times before. This thing knew exactly what it was doing. Every instinct I had screamed at me, "Don't wait, don't let it break through, don't get cornered." I tightened my grip on the .357, aimed at the center of the door, and fired. The first shot exploded in the small room, deafening. Wood splintered. Maya screamed. Something on the other side yelped, a sharp, pained sound that cut off fast. I fired again and again. 3 rounds punched through the door in a cluster. The creature shrieked, high and ragged, and slammed against one of the walls hard. Then it bolted. I heard claws scrabbling against the hardwood, the frantic rhythm of something running on all 4s down the hallway. It moved towards the living room, crashed into something metal, and then absolute silence. We didn't open the door right away. We waited. I kept the gun raised for a long time, my arm trembling, sweat prickling down my neck. Maya slid down the wall into a sitting position, shaking so hard I could hear her boot tapping lightly against the floor. Neither of us said a word. We just listened. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 minutes, I finally worked up the nerve to move. I whispered for Maya to stay put, to lock the door behind me, and to not open it unless she heard my voice. She nodded, eyes glassy with fear, and I eased the bedroom door open. The hallway was dim and still. My stomach clenched the second I saw the wall opposite the bedroom. Dark stains smeared across the wood. Blood. Not a lot, but enough to know I'd hit it. More stains dotted the floorboards in a crooked trail leading toward the living room. I followed them, revolver raised, breath held tight in my chest. The kitchen was a mess. The contents of the fridge were strewn everywhere. Milk container punctured, eggs smashed, shredded cheese scattered across the tile. The creature had finished the rest of the steaks, the ham, and even some of the raw eggs. Anything with protein had been torn open and devoured. In the living room, I saw where it had skidded across the rug and slammed into the metal trash can, knocking it over. All in all, not as bad as I had feared. I went straight to the front door, shut it, locked it, then checked every room, every window, every shadow the house could hide. Nothing. No movement. No sound. The thing was gone. And for the first time since it stepped onto my porch, I let myself breathe. The creature was gone, for the moment. After I had made sure that the coast was clear, I brought Maya out to the living room. We kept the lights low, the curtains closed, and the revolver within easy reach on the coffee table. We sat together on the couch all night, backs pressed into the cushions, jumping at every noise. For a while we didn't talk. We just listened. To the wind, to the house, to every small creak that made our nerves spike. Then, slowly, the adrenaline wore off enough that words started forming again. What do you think that was?" Maya finally whispered. I shook my head. "I don't know. I don't have a name for it." We agreed that it wasn't just an ordinary animal. It looked like something caught halfway between man and beast. Like evolution took a wrong turn, or like some nightmare creature that wasn't supposed to exist had slipped into our world by mistake. Its movements, its hands, the way it seemed to think its way through the house, it all pointed to something far smarter and far stranger than any predator we'd ever known. "It was desperate," Maya murmured, "more scavenger than hunter, like it's been living off whatever it could steal." She paused, her brow furrowed in that focused way she gets when she's puzzling out an animal case. And the way it behaved, it wasn't random. It was adapted, opportunistic. It knew human spaces, doors, handles, where food was usually kept. Most predators don't bother learning that. They don't need to. But this thing, it acted like it's been surviving on the edges of people's lives for a long time, watching, learning what works and what is worth stealing. She rubbed her arms, either from the chill or the memory. Until tonight, it avoided direct confrontation, picked the safest food sources. It went for high-protein items first, meat, eggs, anything dense. That's starving animal logic. But the method? The precision? That was something else. It's like whatever it is, it's learned to live in our shadow. And it wasn't healthy, she added. Its ribs, its gait, something's wrong with it. That got me thinking. I shifted a little, rubbing a hand over my face. If it's that sick, maybe that's why it's never gone after cattle or horses. Hell, even the deer around here are fast and mean when they need to be. Maybe it just isn't strong enough to take on anything bigger than a dog. I shook my head. It's been stealing the easiest calories it can get. That fits what you're saying. Scavenger first, predator second. Maya nodded slowly, her eyes distant, replaying the creature in her mind. Yeah, it's a pattern. Everything it does points to caution and conserving energy. A big prey animal would take too much work and too much risk. Whatever it is, it's surviving, not thriving. We sat in silence again, a different kind this time, less terrified, more baffled. I can't wrap my head around it, she said finally. How something like that could even exist. Me neither. I let out a slow breath. I grew up around here. Seen mountain lions, wolves, black bears, and the odd grizzly. Nothing moves the way that thing moved. It's like a werewolf, she whispered. And when I looked at her, she didn't seem like she was joking. I know. The words tasted strange coming out of my mouth. Unreal. But we'd both seen the same thing. There was no other way to describe it. For a long time, we just talked, quietly, cautiously, about the creature's size, its features, the way it had entered the house, all the raids and sightings across the valley. Every piece of the puzzle made it feel less like some freak incident and more like a pattern. Something had been living in the valley for months, and somehow it had managed to stay hidden. Given all the rumors that got people jumping at shadows and the fact that just about everyone here has guns, that is quite an achievement. The fear didn't go away, but it changed shape, became something that pressed us closer together instead of pushing us apart. At some point, Maya leaned into my side. I put my arm around her without thinking. We stayed like that until the sky outside the windows began to lighten. In the following weeks, I threw myself into reinforcing the house. New doors, new locks, more guns, motion lights across the porch. Reinforced the barn, too. Thicker door, metal latch. Anything to keep a hungry creature away from the animals. I didn't like to admit it out loud, but part of me was scared it might come back for revenge. But it never did. What did come back were the incidents and sightings, not just around my place, across the entire valley. Freezers raided, chickens taken, a dog vanished behind an old cabin. Every new report made my stomach twist. I'd lie awake at night, listening for the creak of boards or the soft scrape of claws against the siding. Then, in late spring, everything stopped, abruptly. One week the sightings were everywhere. The next week, nothing. No more freezer raids or missing pets. The valley fell quiet again. At first, the silence made me even more nervous, like the calm before a storm. But then new tracks appeared. Big ones, deep ones, the kind that makes your breath catch. Grizzly tracks. A few locals managed to catch the new arrival on their game cameras. A massive boar grizzly, shoulders high as my chest. Trees started showing new scratches 8 feet off the ground. Half the valley saw it at least once. Maya and I didn't have to say it out loud. We both came to the same conclusion. The sick, underfed creature that had been raiding freezers probably never stood a chance against a full-grown male grizzly. Either it was killed, or it fled the valley the moment the large predator moved in. Whatever the truth was, life slipped back into something closer to normal. But the memory of that night, the creature on my porch, the sound of its claws in the hallway, the yelp when the bullets hit, never faded. And neither did the bond between Maya and me. The fear we'd shared, the way we'd held onto each other afterward. It changed something in both of us, brought us closer in ways nothing else ever had.